This is TWiT.
Strangely, one of the features that got the most excitement in the crowd and that I'm most excited about is a feature that turns off all the other features, which is called Do Not Disturb when driving, which will sense when you're driving and lock out your phone so that you can't get distracted by push notifications, or will limit your push notifications to very specific sets, including actually querying people who text you and say, is this important enough to override Do Not Disturb while driving? And boy, if you say yes to that and it's not important, you're going to get in trouble, is what I'm going to say. Somebody's going to be mad. So I'm curious what you all thought about this announcement and what Apple's doing here with locking iPhone features out when you're in the car. Micah?
I think it's smart. Yeah, I think it's a really smart thing. And, you know, there were some companies who were kind of working on bringing these features to phones, but it was always like, I don't know, cellular carriers and insurance companies. And there's just something to say about how entirely uncool it is to be like, yeah, I downloaded the AT&T app so it could lock all my devices and no one can text me while I'm driving. But the fact that Apple has this built in and that, you know, you can enable this feature and it just says, hey, whenever we can sense that you're driving in a vehicle, then we're going to make things, you know, so you won't see things. Because I think part of the problem, I think people would be more apt to, you know, stay away from texting and driving or Snapchatting and driving or what have you, if they don't see those things in the first place. Because ultimately, a lot of us, we just end up in the end having prehistoric brains. And it's like we see something light up and, you know, our eyes instantly turn to it and look at it. And it's just kind of the way we're wired, or at least have wired ourselves over time. And if those notifications just aren't there in the first place, then it's less likely that you're going to pay attention to them, which I realize sounds really obvious. But at the same time, I do think there's something to kind of keeping that out of your line of vision. And then your brain does a better job of resisting needing to get that little dopamine hit from seeing, you know, the latest Instagram like on your selfie. So this just seems like a good idea overall. And I hope that people do take advantage of it. And the fact that you can kind of set it up to say, hey, you know, this person's driving right now, but you can contact them later is really nice.
One thing I wasn't clear about from the demo is whether this also shuts them off on an Apple Watch, because I'm pretty good at not looking at my phone, but I do sort of sometimes glance at my wrist without totally taking my eye off the road, which I thought of as sort of being a maybe semi-safe halfway point.
Yeah, I have that same little bargaining behavior, which is, well, you know, it's not looking at a phone, it's just glancing at my watch. People wear watches that don't have text on them, and they check their watches when they're driving, and nobody dies probably, except one of the things that struck me about this is this is a feature that will, I mean, almost certainly save lives, right? Yeah. Just by interceding and saying most of these notifications are junk, which I like some of these features all the time, honestly, on my iPhone, and just getting them out of the way and being contextual and maybe letting through if somebody on your contacts list calls or texts because it's super important, but otherwise just like quieting down while you're driving seems like such a good idea.
That's the important word is context, because I really want to live in a computing world where I have context-dependent notifications. Because if I'm driving if while I'm driving, my husband texts me and says, while you're out and about, please pick up groceries. That is a notification I don't mind getting while I'm driving, especially if I can get it read to me instead of reading it myself.
Yeah.
But if it's somebody else going, hey, can you pass on the name of so-and-so that you recommended for such and such? No, I don't need that one. But I would love to see more context-dependent notifications. I think this is a good start. I hope that context-dependent gets split out from the safety aspect so that we start working on that more. I think the safety aspect is super important. I think context-dependent will ultimately be better for computing in the long run.
Yeah, in the chat room, they're talking about nanny features, and this is the thing. This can be a nanny feature if you're weak-willed and you know you're going to check your phone if you don't see it. I think the upside of this is not when it's a nanny feature, but when it is that smart assistant saying, I'm only going to buzz you when you're driving if there's really something important. Otherwise, I'm going to lay off, and that's how it should be. That's not preventing me, a weak person, from checking my phone while I'm driving. That's preventing me, a regular driver, from being distracted by pointless things. And there's a difference there.
You don't need LinkedIn notifications while you're driving. I thought we all did.
No.
Well, it depends on who I want to add to my social network, but probably my professional network. It's very important.
I found that in general, life is better if you default to turning off notifications on a very high percentage of the apps you use.
Yes.
And to some degree, I'm already down to a point where most of the notifications I get are at least semi-important to me, and there's no absolute junk.
It does make me wonder if this is the beachhead for a more smart assistant-based feature where Apple basically says, would you like to go into some mode where Siri essentially looks at your notifications and only directly buzzes you when it's important, right? Because that would be very valuable.
I think that is where we're headed, honestly, because some of the stuff that I've already seen and, some of the stuff that we'll see with the public beta hits. But let's just say I happen to have come across some of this stuff while I'm totally not using the NDA'd beta software. Anyway, Siri is paying more attention than Siri used to. And even in conversations, because we did see this on stage, so I could talk about that, of course, the keyboard and the predictive text, it was almost scary because I was talking to someone on Twitter about a particular subject, and then when I went to an iMessage conversation with that same person and I used the word Twitter, then the predictive text popped up the subject that I had just discussed on Twitter in this iMessage conversation. So if Siri's already getting smart enough to kind of understand to whom I'm speaking and about what I'm speaking, I can see how this would easily be applied to notifications and to adding calendar events and making sure that I have the contacts that I need, and maybe even sending out a message and it's like, wait, you're sending out a message about this, but don't you also want to include this person? Of course I do, Siri. So I think it's already starting to do that, and iOS 11 right now is the entry into that, and figuring out, with the data that it gets on device, how it can use that, and then hopefully we'll see that kind of break out even more and see it applied to other features across iOS.
I'd like to see more information clustered according to context. With something like this, just to give a recent real world example, I recently took my daughter's Daisy trip camping. We caravaned there in 3 cars, and there was a great deal of texting. Hopefully people were just shouting their text while they drove children. There was a great deal of texting to coordinate where to go on these back roads in Marin County. And I'm thinking about this do not disturb while driving feature, and if there was a way to say, hey Siri, this is related to the camping event today. Please make sure that Betsy and Christine are able to text me.
You just triggered your own Siri, Lisa.
Of course I did. Siri.
It knows your voice. It knows your voice.
Siri. Hey Siri, I'm going camping today. Please make sure that Christine and Betsy can text me no matter what. Like, that would be great if I could do something like that.
And to be clear here, this is not turned on by default, but it will sense when you're driving, and then when you're done driving the first time, it will say, would you like me to turn this feature on? And then you can also say, yes, I'm a passenger, I'm in a taxi, something like that. That's there too.
What I'd also be curious about is presumably if you can control when it's turned on and turned off, is your phone recording when it's turned on and turned off?
Recording what?
I mean, is your phone logging when you go into driving mode versus non-driving mode?
I don't know.
And then the next question is, can your insurance companies get that data and figure out when you're driving?
Probably not, because it's Apple and they're not going to hand that data over. But it probably does know.
If that data exists, however, and that's
my guess is that it doesn't, because it's Apple and that's a road they don't want to go. They kind of don't want to know. Yeah, I suspect.
Because if the data existed, then someone's going to ask about it. So it's better just not to have that data.
Insurance companies, some offer up those little dongles you can plug into your OBD2 port. I don't know, Obi-Wan Kenobi port.
Yeah, that's the one.
And it will. Thank you. I thought that's it. And it'll keep track of your zooming and your braking and when you're using your phone and when not. And it's an opt-in thing, but you can end up saving money on your bill if you use it. So hopefully Apple isn't going to get into that business.
No, because I'm thinking distracted driving is something that I'm sure insurance companies are approaching, if not from a safety point of view, from a this is going to cost us money point of view. And so I expect that to collide with...
you get the iOS 11 discount on your auto insurance, maybe.
I also sort of wondered if at some point, if all phones have this sort of functionality, whether states such as California that tell you you're not supposed to be using your phone anyway, or at least touching it, might think it was a good idea to have some sort of legislation tied to mandating that you use these features.
Yeah.
I would not be shocked if there's somebody at Apple who is planning iOS features and talks to people in various governments about what might be coming down the pike, whether it's California or whether it's the EU, somebody saying, we think that you could be smarter at doing this and trying to get out in front of it. Maybe say, look, why don't we build on this feature that we already have rather than you inventing your own legislation about it. Just use this as a model. And we already built it, so it's good for us, right? That could be. That wouldn't surprise me at all.